Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Jackie Lukman, and welcome to another edition of the People's Power Lunch with me, the People's Prophetess Jacqueline Lukman. Ooh, mm, today is a day. Lots and lots going on. There's a lot of breaking news, and I honestly didn't know what the heck to talk about today because there's been so much, that has been going on. I was here enjoying my green beans and canned potatoes. I can have canned potatoes every once in a while because they are leached of their potassium, which is bad for the kidneys. So every once in a while, I throw some canned potatoes and some green beans and throw some olive oil and lots of seasoning that's not salt on them, and just have a good old time noshing out on my canned potato green bean dish. um yeah, there's a lot going on. The Ukraine and Russia is they are arguing over who is responsible for the missile strike that killed 40 Ukrainian prisoners of war. My money is on Ukraine being responsible for that because, Ukraine has actually been committing war crimes in Ukraine. The Ukrainian army has been committing war crimes in Ukraine in their 8-year civil war against the ethnic Russians in the eastern region of Ukraine, the Donbass region, since 2014. So, my money is on the Ukraine's committing this. But hey, if Russia did it, then they need to be held to account for it. But me, my spidey sense is like, nah, this Ukraine. This Ukraine did this, and they are getting the Western media to do what the Western media has been doing, which is cape for Ukraine, ignore their war crimes, and then when Ukraine does something horrific, they turn around and they blame Russia for it. That's what my money is on. I'm willing to be wrong, and if I turn out to be wrong, that's cool. But all right, I see you all coming in. Thanks for coming in to have lunch with me today. You all the comrades, Franny French, 40J Blaze, Ready Root Revolutionary One, Shock G, Comrade P, Lisa Catlett, Leah Boggs, Pamela Jones, Eugene Mason, CB, Devin Dean, where we got Martin Hernandez, Manny Nile, Stoner Loner. What's going on, y'all? So good to see you. What are y'all having to lunch today? What y'all bring into the lunchroom? Manny Nile says, you have chopped cheese. I love cheese. I don't think I've ever heard of that, but okay. Ready Revolutionary, you're having Creek? What is that? What do y'all be eating, yo? Um, what else y'all having for lunch? Leah is having a nectarine and water. I'm sorry, that's not enough food for me. What are y'all doing with the lunch? I'm very confused. Yes, green beans and potatoes. You know that's country. That's country though, right? That's real country. So, once again, y'all, as usual, sorry for the bad lighting up in this piece. They still have not fixed this light. So I'm doing the best I can with my iPhone camera light. And as I said, okay, Monty has explained. Oh, a cheesesteak. Girl, why didn't you just say a cheese? Okay. Okay, cool. Let's see. What else y'all having? Tilapia sandwich with fries. Delicious, delicious. Um, doubles? What? Stop using code for the food. What's a double? What is that? Uh, let's see. Martin had breakfast and lunch in a salad with homegrown kale, cukes, and cherry tomatoes. Yum yum. I brought in a bunch of cherry, Paul Robeson cherry tomatoes into the studio for lunch today that I grew because as I think I told you all, I was really lazy with the garden last year, and I didn't completely clean up the old growth. The when the garden went through its cycle and died. I didn't clean up all of the old vines and stuff. So The cherry tomato vines grew themselves this year. Everything I didn't clean up grew itself. So I had like six cherry tomato, they're bushes at this point. And yeah, so I've just got this, I've got a bumper crop of cherry tomatoes, of Paul Robeson cherry tomatoes. So I brought some in today and people have been enjoying them. And that really makes me very, very happy. Um, Doubles is a Trini dish. Okay, Leah, I need to know what's in doubles now. Chicken stir fry, yum, yum. Pizza from the local shop. Sadly, because of the kidneys, I cannot have pizza any longer. Um, yeah, so a quick kidney update for y'all, because you really want to know, right? But for the next few weeks, things are going to be even more erratic than they have been, because the diagnosis from the biopsy is that I absolutely need a kidney transplant and that I will be on dialysis immediately, as in like next week. So I am just going with the flow with all of this. I am trusting the universe. I am believing the ancestors. I am trusting God that all will be fine. This is just a process that I have to go through to get healthier. So I'm not as freaked out about it as I was when I was first diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. And I was told then that you need to be preparing for a transplant. And I was like, transplant? What the fuck? Right? But now that I've educated myself on the thing, the whole process thing, I feel a little bit better about. Well, I actually feel kind of a lot better about it. Actually, um, the dialysis that they are going to put me on is the peritoneal dialysis. So they actually call that light dialysis. Yeah, we'll see how light it's going to be, but yeah, they y'all are eating lunch, so I'm not going to tell you what they do, but I don't have to do the full hemodialysis where you have to go to the center and you lay there for like 3 4 hours and you have all of your blood cycle through this artificial kidney and clean through this artificial kidney. Peritoneal dialysis is done. It's done at home. And so yeah, so you're just gonna have to look up peritoneal dialysis yourself. I'm not gonna mess up your lunch by telling you how it. No. so yeah, I have to do that next week. Um, and I have a consultation with a kidney specialist nutritionist uh, that I actually started today. And I will consult with the transplant team at Georgetown University Hospital for, learning what that process entails, like how I um, would go about getting family and friends to undergo testing for a potential living donor, and what would entail what being on the kidney list looks like if I do not have a living donor. All of that stuff. Yeah, not this isn't like, I'm not like, "Woo, yay, I'm just, too blessed to be stressed." This is No, that's not my attitude about this at all. I know that if I don't do this, I know this for a certainty. If I do not do this, I will die because my kidneys are failing. That is just the truth. So I look at this kind of in the extremely logical, pragmatic way that I look at pretty much every fucking thing. That look, I have to do this in order to live. That's just the truth. And as uncomfortable as all of this is going to be physically, mentally, I'm just like, and spiritually, I'm just like, all right, cool, let's do this and just get done the things that I need to get done so I can get to healthier. The good thing is I'm actually pretty healthy. I'm losing the weight that I need to lose. I'm working on getting my blood pressure much better under control than it was before. And speaking of that, before we get into the serious international news that connects us to the Biden administration going after folks in Africa, we gonna get there, I promise. Speaking of hypertension, what doctors don't tell us is that, and by us I mean African descended people, Mexican descended people, Latin American descended people, and indigenous people, is that your blood pressure is high if it's like 140 over 90, right? Those of us who have struggled with hypertension, particularly those of us who have struggled with medication resistant hypertension, which was my deal, um, we think that, after having blood pressure that's been as high as like 150 over 98 or something like that, that like 140 over 90 is good, 140 over 89, oh, that's great. No, it's not. That's actually blood pressure that's high enough to cause damage to your kidneys. And that is what caused the damage to my kidneys. For years, I had blood pressure that stayed in the 140 over high 80s, low 90s range. And doctors would be like, well, that's better than it was before, and just not really say much else. And then I finally get to a doctor who's like, it shouldn't be this high for this long. Let me put you on some other medication. And then that helped, but then stress will fuck you up. Life stress will just I cannot tell you how important it is to not um dismiss the effect that stress has on your health. And for us in particular, in this ongoing struggle against this imperialist, capitalist imperialist beast, particularly for those who are actively organizing, this stress ain't no joke. And then there's the regular everyday stress of everyday life, your job, your relationships, whatever. And yeah, so I'm just asking y'all to stay on top of your blood pressure. And by that I mean do whatever you can to get a home blood pressure monitor. You don't get have to get an expensive one. Get a cheap one from CVS or whatever um, you know, pharmacy you can get one. But do get yourself a blood pressure monitor. Check your blood pressure every single day. Every day. I know that's a lot, but believe me, you are going to want to know your blood pressure patterns. You're going to want to check your blood pressure 3 different times a day. You want to check it in the morning, check it in the afternoon, check it in the evening, because you want to see when your blood pressure is the highest, when it's the lowest, and you want to see what your averages are. Um, Usually, your blood pressure is higher in the morning. That's kind of normal. And if you're pretty active, it's the lowest in the evening, and that's cool. But you want to get a kind of pattern of what's going on in your blood pressure. If you see that your blood pressure is consistently above, like literally 120 over 70 something, get yourself to a doctor. If you have health insurance, please, because I don't want any of you to have to go through what I am having to face. And some of you in the chat have already talked about your loved ones, your family members who are going through this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should and should not eat. I'm not the I'm not the plate police right here. I'm not, even as I have slowly kind of transitioned to a more plant based diet, although it's not completely. And I have eliminated as much as I can extra sodium from my diet. I will tell you that you should do that, definitely. Everybody should eliminate extra sodium from your diet as much as you can. Try not to eat frozen foods that aren't frozen vegetables, right? Try to stay away from those frozen vegetables with the tasty sauces, full of sodium. Frozen dinners, full of sodium. Even the lean cuisine and the diet one, full of fucking sodium. Don't no. Stay away from those as much as you can. Um, Yeah, so I would encourage people to eat lots of fruit, lots of vegetables, and meat in moderation. But I'm not the plate police here. I will just caution us in particular. We gotta kick the salt shaker off the table as much as we can. So okay, that's my personal update. So I'll let y'all know how things are going. I'm actually kind of amused at how fast things are moving now that I finally had this damn biopsy that it took me like a year to finally get. And now they're like, oh, we got to get you into dialysis. And I'm like, okay. So, all right. It is what it is. That is what it is, folks. There it is. So, okay. The Biden administration, and this whole targeting of Africans in particular, tying it into this Russophobia that we are seeing in the United States. It's a big deal, and I think that a little bit earlier in the year, oh, thank you, Yipper. Oodles and noodles. I understand it's a struggle food, and hold on before I get to the political news. Let me say this about food and poverty. People love to demonize black folks about the way we eat, how, oh, soul food is killing us, the collard greens and the macaroni and cheese and the fried chicken, that's killing us, as if we eat like that every single fucking day in the day of the week. And we don't. You know why? Because at least 40% of us can't afford to. The poverty rate among black people in this country is about 40%. That's almost half of us. Almost half of us literally cannot afford to eat like folks think we eat every day. So, our issue when it comes to the food, and I hear folks and I see it in the chat sometimes, oh, what we eat is killing us faster than the cops. Please understand, the reason black people, poor black people, poor indigenous people, poor Mexican and Latin American descended people have the health issues with hypertension and diabetes and kidney disease that we do is because we are poor. So the only food we can afford is the highly processed, chemical and sodium laden food that is boxed and is cheap and can last a long time in the pantry on the shelf as opposed to in the refrigerator, right? This is why we have hypertension is such a problem in our communities, the poor black and the poor indigenous and the poor Mexican. It's not because we sitting around eating collard greens and fried chicken and baked macaroni and cheese every 2-3 days a week. We can't afford to eat like that. Not no. It is because the food that we can afford to eat is highly processed, full of sodium, it's full of chemicals, it's in a box, it's in a can, and it lasts a long time because we don't have enough money to go shopping every week at Trader Joe's and Whole Paycheck, Whole Foods. That's my name for Whole Foods. And the stress of being poor, the stress of poverty, life just in general, y'all, life in general is stressful. I don't know where people get this idea that life in a capitalist country is a cakewalk. For rich people, life is great because they have enough money to get people to take care of all the shit that you and me don't have enough time in the day or extra hands to deal with. So stress for poor people is a constant issue. That's why poor people are sick more. That's why poor people literally walk around every day with chronic pain, chronic headaches, chronic aches that they literally cannot afford to not go to work and go to the doctor to see because they probably don't have health insurance because they're poor. And if they do have health insurance, they can't afford to take off work because they don't have sick leave like that, right? And then if they do have health insurance and they have sick leave, they still can't go to the doctor because the copays are expensive and they can't afford that. That's stressful, y'all, every day. And if they have kids, Jesus Christ. So the poverty, the stress from poverty, figuring out how you're going to make ends meet, how you're going to feed people on this little bit of money, yourself and then your kids too on this little bit of money, and pay the rent and buy clothes for these kids that are outgrowing these clothes like crazy. All of how you going to make these ends meet, and you're poor. That's stressful. And then you got people who don't live your life. Some people who look just like you, who look just like us, talking about you need to eat more greens. Your problem is what you eat. You need to live a holistic lifestyle. That's fucking stressful. And all we're doing with that kind of advice is stressing people who are already stressed out even more. We're isolating and we're alienating those people. And dear God, please stop talking to people like that. Stop it. I've said it before, but I swear to God, I ain't gonna never stop saying it, because as long as I keep seeing people showing up in the chat talking about, well, a holistic vegan plant-based lifestyle is the way that we can get out of these issues. Nah, overthrowing capitalism is how we get out this shit. No, killing capitalism is how we save our lives. That's how we do it. Thank you, Easy D. That's right. And then I love it when people are like, "Well, if you meditated, what kind of time do people think that poor people have to meditate when you work in 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and you barely have time to sleep in between them jobs? What meditate when?" Okay. All right. Now I got my personal beef off. Thank you, Oracle at DeFi. I hope I pronounced that right. Hypertension is not just about salt, it is also the stress on our bodies from surviving. And just like I just said, poor folks in the capitalist system have a hell of a lot more stress than the bosses who steal in our money, than the bosses who steal in our wages and hoarding all that wealth from us. Those people are not stressed. And then here's the thing, they're not even stressed out about us rising up against them. They've got us so well conditioned in this country, they can keep doing this shit to us and not feel threatened at all. We need to change that. We need to go Sri Lanka on these people. Come on, y'all. What is y'all doing? You sitting there shaming people because of what they eat, and these people on Capitol Hill are literally colluding with the oligarchs in this country to continue to steal people's wages while they work people to death and then shame those people for the way they live. Get the heck out of it. Ooh. Okay, let me get to the serious let me get to the serious political stuff. So, I'll be all right, y'all. I'm going to be all right. And I appreciate you all support. I really do. So, okay, serious political stuff. I don't know if you all have heard. I just heard today that federal agents served a warrant at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. This was originally reported, I think, in the St. Petersburg News or the I'm sorry, the Tampa Bay Times. But there's a paywall on that, and I wasn't going to give them any more money, so I picked it up on Yahoo News. So they point out that federal agents have served a warrant at the Uhuru House this morning. Um, the spokesperson for the federal agency, I don't even know the FBI, um, Ken Knight, didn't provide any further information, saying that the FBI was not in charge of the investigation. I don't believe that for a second, but okay. He said more information will be available at a news conference with the FBI, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Florida, and the St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway, and I'll follow up on that because it should have happened by now. But this morning at the Uhuru House, um, A warrant was served, and they point out in this piece that the Uhuru movement is part of a worldwide organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, uniting African people as one people for liberation, social justice, self reliance, and economic development, right? And you and I are like, cool, bet that's what we want. Oh, but not the fascists in this country, not the democracy claiming um, uh, Biden administration. Because remember, this is the Biden administration now doing this. It's this part. Oops, is this part that they don't want. That part, yeah, they don't like that part. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Earlier this month, this person, Kenny J. Raymond, uh, used a flamethrower to burn the Pan African flag outside of the Uhuru House on July 7th. He was arrested for it. He said in his arrest warrant that he hated socialists and he hated seeing the ugly red, black, and green flag on his drive to and from work. Ain't nobody did nothing to this dude. Ain't nobody did nothing to him. He just didn't like socialists and didn't like seeing the flag on his drive to and from work. Now, let's be clear about this kind of thing going on in the context of what is happening in in the US in regard to Black radical, particularly socialist movements. And I say this with the caveat. I'm gonna give you this caveat because I know it is important, considering the events that transpired a few days ago in regard to another Black radical movement that was very, very problematic, isn't even the word, but I do think there is going to be a growing pattern of the FBI under the Biden administration going after legit Black radical movements, particularly socialist movements. But let me say this about the Uhuru movement. I'm not at all saying that I completely agree with everything they have ever done, everything they have ever said. That they got problems. This is some problems, yes. I do think, though, that if we look at the, let me bring this up so I don't get this wrong. Um, I do think that when we look at the charges that have been filed against the former leader of Black Hammer, Ghazi Kadzo, something in the charges, I think, connects to what the Biden administration is ramping up to do domestically that they've pretty blatantly said they're going to do on the continent. And this is what I'm talking about. So the charges that were filed against Ghazi after tragically someone who apparently was held against their will in the Black Hammer House and took their own life. They called authorities, and authorities came to the house and raided the house and found the person that had taken their life. Um, as a result of that incident, the charges that have been filed against Ghazi are whose legal state name is Augustus C. Romaine, um, include aggravated sodomy, which is, I mean, this is all about the anti-homophobia narrative that we're seeing rise up again. Because why is this? Two counts of conspiracy to commit a felony, two counts of false imprisonment, being a party to a crime, two counts of kidnapping, being a party to a crime, two counts of aggravated assault, being a party to a crime, and two counts of criminal street gang activity. That's the key right there, I think. because regardless of what we think about Ghazi and Black Hammer, like I said, extremely, extremely problematic isn't even the word for what went on with Black Hammer. Um, and yes, people were held against their will, and yes, there was abuse. Um, but the fact that the charges included Ghazi and the organization Black Hammer being equated to a criminal street gang, that seems, aside from the sodomy charges, like again, sodomy is not a crime. In remember, because sodomy laws existed to criminalize homosexual people, to criminalize gay people. So now all of a sudden I'm not saying that he shouldn't be charged with a bunch of other shit. He should be, but sodomy? Come on. And then the fact that he's also charged now with this criminal street gang activity, that screams the FBI is trying to charge him and the Black Hammer organization under some federal RICO charges to me, and that screams to me a new way that the FBI under the Biden administration is going to go after Black radical organizations. I was suspicious about the street gang activity charge in regard to Ghazi's charges. I'm convinced that that's what's going to happen. That Biden, the Biden administration, the FBI under the Biden administration is going to go after more Black radical, particularly socialist organizations and people. Now that this Uhuru House thing has happened, this raid has happened. And I really do feel like, thank you, Mani, absolutely, they are laying the legal groundwork to go after Black radical socialist African, Pan African organizations. Because, let me share with you the legislative reason this is happening. Remember, we were talking about this little piece of legislation a little while ago on a bunch of other channels. I think Hood Communist had a piece about it. Black Agenda Report had a piece about it. But let's revisit this again, because this is absolutely connected to this stuff. I absolutely believe it is, particularly the raid on Uhuru House. HR 7311, Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act. This was introduced by old coon ass Representative Gregory Meeks, Democrat from New York. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the Senate. And this, so far, this legislation has passed the House. I think a preliminary vote in the Senate has come out with a lot of support in the Senate. But I think it has yet to pass the Senate, but it will. It will pass the Senate. I think it will. And when it passes the Senate, it will then, as you can see with the little tracker, go to the president. And then when it goes to the president, it will be signed into law. It will be. Because, see, this piece of legislation does a couple of things. The actual text of the legislation, let me give you the link to this in the chat so you can follow this yourself. And this Gov Tracker is a really great resource to find out where any piece of legislation that has been introduced is in the process of becoming a law. So this particular legislation does a couple of things. Let me see. And oh, here we go. Here are my highlights. I always got to make sure I got my highlights because, I read all this stuff beforehand to try to be prepared. And I hate it when my highlights disappear. And then I have to go find this stuff again. So this legislation does a couple of things. And this is from News 24, which is, I think, a French publication, I think. But this is what it does. This is how the US is going to try to monitor Russia's activities in Africa. This legislation is really, it's in response to the lack of influence the US has on the continent, or the way the US influence on the continent is declining, as US influence is declining around the world, which is why the non-aligned countries and the multipolarity of alliances of countries that are no longer aligned with the United States is growing around the world. So this is in direct response to the fact that more than half of the African countries on the continent chose to be neutral on the US and the United Nations resolutions on Russia's involvement. I'm not going to say invasion, military action in Ukraine. So that was like the United States was like, oh no, we have to do something about that. So, so they came up with this Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act, um, through which the U.S. wants to hold African governments accountable and their officials who are complicit in aiding Russia's malign influence and activities. Basically, they just want to punish African governments for not siding with the U.S. in the wars that the U.S. chooses to um, uh, um, cause, proxy wars using another country to fight Russia. That's all that is. The Senate did, like I said, put on April 27th, the Senate did do a preliminary vote. 415 voted in favor, 9 against. It has not yet been signed into law. They'll tell you that, Gregory Meeks introduced the bill. The law says that Congress will regularly assess the scale and scope of the Russian Federation's influence and activities in Africa that undermine the U.S. objectives and interests. Gee, I wonder what those interests and objectives are that the U.S. has on the continent of Africa. Hmm. Is it democracy? Is it human rights? No, I think it's oil and minerals and resource extraction and exploitation of labor. Those are the interests and the objectives that the US has on the continent of Africa, just like those are the interests that the former colonizers of the African continent continue to have on the continent. Um, and the bill seeks to determine how to address and counter that influence and activities effectively, including through appropriate U.S. foreign assistance programs. And this means more overt U.S. funding for coups in African nations. Yeah, and to hold accountable the Russian Federation and African governments and their officials who are complicit in aiding such malign influence and activities. Now, this literally says that African nations have no right to decide who they want to partner with. And the United States can come in and punish African nations for forming any kind of alliance with Russia. That's what this law says. So the United States, through the Democrat black guy, Gregory Meeks, basically said to people in Africa, fuck you and your sovereignty and your self determination. Fuck you. So, this article goes on to say that on April 12th, in the middle of the war in Ukraine, I love how they Russia scored a diplomatic victory when it signed a military cooperation agreement with Cameroon. Russia has numerous deals in at least 20 African countries whereby there is collaboration with regard to international defense and security policy, training troops, military education, medicine, and topography. Like China, Russia is engaging with people on the continent in a way that is different from the way the US engages with people, where the US uses the stick and the military. And Russia, I'm not saying that they're the good guys, I'm just saying that they are kind of willing to pay for the alliances that they know they need, because they know that they need access to those very same resources that the US and the EU wants to steal. Just like China is well aware that they need those resources in Africa. They can't produce them in their countries, on their continents, so they're willing to pay for them. And the US is like, no, we just want we just want to take your stuff, and we want you to let us take your stuff. So we're going to, send the military in and fund a bunch of coups and opposition uprisings. That's what we're going to do when we find out that the African governments and people within the African governments are in any kind of way dealing with Russia. And this is because the United States has a little anti-communism problem. Even though we keep saying it, but these people just don't believe it. Russia is not a communist country. But I think we have to be clear about the fact that for the US to continue to demonize Russia as if it is this big communist threat that Vladimir Putin in particular is trying to reestablish communism and regrow or reestablish the Soviet empire under communism. None of that has to actually be true for the US to still treat Russia today as it treated Russia the way it did before the destruction of the USSR. And I have stopped saying the collapse or the fall of the USSR, because those two words, collapse and fall, kind of connote that it just sort of happened on its own. And it didn't. It didn't. The US neoliberal policies and US anti communist aggression, the Cold War against Russia, starting with World War II, before it even ended, contributed to the destruction of the USSR. That was the goal. So the US has always seen Russia as, or in the lens of its former self, the USSR. So it doesn't matter that Vladimir Putin is an oligarch and likes oligarchs and is a capitalist, right on par with the capitalists and the oligarchs in this country. They don't care. That doesn't matter. The United States is so committed to anti communism, just like they're so committed to white supremacy and patriarchy, that Putin doesn't have to not be a communist for them to continue to operate against Russia and anyone connected with Russia through the lens that is tainted with anti-communism. So this is why not only are communist and socialist organizations and governments in Africa that are aligned or friendly with Russia going to be targeted, as well as those not communist governments in Africa are going to be targeted for entering into any kinds of negotiations or deals with Africa. But this is where in the United States, African and Pan-African socialist and communist organizations will also be targeted, because we will be viewed through the lens of that anti-communism that exists still here in the United States. I hope I'm making some kind of sense. And I'm just able to look at you guys' comments. Todd Makes says, thanks for joining, Todd. If African leaders in the AU are so weak as to let the US get away with this, then what are the people supposed to do? The people are supposed to rise up, which is what the people on the continent have been doing. And please don't put the aid. Don't put any hope in the African Union, because NATO has been helping the African Union ever since the African Union has existed. I actually talked about that, I think, in a presentation I did with on a symposium that I did a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to publish that paper. I'm gonna post it so you can read it. And I do talk about how NATO, um, on its own page, says, yeah, we've been partners with the African Union since the African Union has existed. So yeah, don't put your hopes in the African Union, please. They are in bed with the imperialists. The people on the continent are organizing, have been organizing, and are rising up, and have been. This is why we don't hear about the struggles on the continent in US media, because they don't want us to know that African people have been rising up against the imperialism and the neo-colonialism that the US and its partners, the EU, and now AFRICOM, but it was NATO at first, have been imposing on the continent. They don't want us to know. They don't want us to know about that. So this is why we have to be Pan-Africanists. This is why we must be international in our struggle. We cannot be complaining about what the FBI is about to do to African, Pan-African, socialist, communist, black radical organizations here in the US. That's what I think this raid on the Uhuru House is portending for us. We can't be complaining about, the new COINTELPRO that we are being subjected to, without connecting it to the ongoing struggle against the very same systems that have been going on the continent, that will now just be carried on through the Biden administration. So organizations that are African and openly, unashamedly socialist, keep y'all head on a swivel, because they coming for you. They coming for us. And I think this raid on the Uhuru House indicates the shape of things to come. And they're going to claim that because these organizations, not just that they're Black radical and they fall under the Black identity extremist rubric that the FBI has carried over from the original COINTELPRO, where they just call folks Black extremists, right? They just stuck identity in the middle there to make it sound good, I guess, to claim like they were, doing something new, but it's really the same thing that they did to the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army and every Black, yeah. So now, realizing that people have begun to see, hey, wait a minute, maybe these Negroes have a point about all the racism and the police killings. And I mean, because after George Floyd, we saw what those white people did. We saw white people in Portland like, no, fuck this. After the public lynching of George Floyd, even white people were like, oh, hell no, Black lives do matter, damn it, and took to the streets. So the system had to come up with something. So just so happens, none of this is coincidental, but just so happens this little proxy war in Ukraine is kicked off after being planned since 2014, by the way, by under Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. Okay. So now that the support for this proxy war in Ukraine is waning, because it is, because people could see we're in a recession now. People can't afford gas, food, housing, clothes. People mad. People are mad. So even people who were a few weeks ago talking about Slava Ukraini, not even realizing that's literally like a neo-Nazi slogan from the Nazi sympathizers in Ukraine, that literally, and flying the Ukrainian flag just a few weeks ago. Now They're being squeezed at the pump and at the cash register. They're like, wait a minute, we can't give any more money to Ukraine. So the foundation for support for this proxy war in Ukraine is waning. So now the Democrats have to continue their Russophobia that they started stoking in 2016 with the claims that Russia hacked the election and caused Hillary Clinton to win. People kind of forgot about that. So they're like, oh, I know. Let's target all of these Black radical organizations that became emboldened and got support after the uprisings against racist police terrorism in 2020, the global uprising against racist police terrorism in 2020. Let's target them and let's smear them as, you guessed it, Russian assets influenced by Russia, especially if they're socialists. That's what's happening. All of this is connected. It is all connected. What I mean, I cannot understate how dangerous a time we are entering. And I know that some people's answer for this, and this is something that I have to deal with, this liberalism that I have to deal with personally, like as an organizer, as I'm trying to organize, my church. I am, because I'm a revolutionary, baby. I'm gonna organize whoever will let me sit there and talk to them about why they need to organize. I am. And not everybody's lost. I actually did win a few converts to at least thinking differently about this situation in Ukraine just this past Sunday at an event that we had at our church, where, one person, I was on a panel discussion, and one person put Putin in their top five of autocratic dictatorial leaders. And he said that, well, how did Putin become president of Russia? Well, he just said, I want to be president of Russia. And I was like, excuse me? Dude, as much as I love you, and I, we work well together, and I love you to pieces, but you wrong as two left shoes. So I did what I do. I sat there and I told this people full of Black folks in Christian people, convinced that Vladimir Putin is their mortal enemy that they need to vote Democratic to get rid of, right? I sat there and I told these people exactly how Vladimir Putin became president of Russia. And it was because Bill Clinton sent a whole team to Moscow to manage the reelection campaign of Boris Yeltsin because he was fitting to lose to a communist. And the United States government under Democrat first Black president, thanks Toni Morrison, Bill Clinton, refused to let the Russians vote for a communist. And I forget his name right now because I got so much running through my head, but the Russian people hated Boris Yeltsin, and they were going to vote for a communist to lead Russia again. And Bill Clinton was like, oh, hell no, they're not. That was the Democrats. So then when Boris Yeltsin continued on his regular drunken shenanigans and fucked things up in Russia, and the people in Russia was like, I don't understand how we even voted for this guy again. What the hell? And he turned the Russian military loose on the Russian parliament, and he had to step down in shame and disgrace. Who did he appoint to take his place to serve out the rest of his term? Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, who I do not believe won the election. And I reminded folks that, yes, they do have elections in Russia, and they're probably way more democratic than the shit we do here calling ourselves voting. But I didn't say that, because I wasn't church. I do have some manners. But yeah, I had to block the sexy naked thing. Yeah, sorry about that. But in the next election, I don't think Putin won, or if he did win the next election, He lost the second time he ran, and then he came back and ran again, and now he has been voted that he's president, and that's how he literally became president. So there was not, you do have to, you have to be consistent with the truth when you are revolutionary. It doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter how you are going to be received, and honestly, it doesn't matter what it's going to cost you. That is, and I say that knowing that we're about to enter this period of very brutal repression by the under the Biden administration. The truth is the truth. There are going to be times when I am going to be in places where people are going to be demonizing Putin and demonizing folks who refuse to condemn Russia for their finally having a military response in to what was being done to ethnic Russian people in Ukraine by the US, the EU, and NATO. And that might cost me. That might cost you. Just saying you are a Pan-Africanist, that's going to cost you. Because people are going to be like, what's that mean? Oh, so are you a socialist? Oh, does that mean that you support Russia? It's going to get there. It is going to get there because, listen, our people are still deeply, deeply, deeply indoctrinated, deeply indoctrinated. And there's really just no getting around that. So, this period of repression that we are entering into, I think, I mean, it's not new, but it is something that a new generation of organizers, activists, whatever we want to call ourselves, revolutionaries, we have not experienced before. So um, we need to be prepared. So that's why I'm telling you this, so that you can be prepared. Um, how can you be prepared? Number one, whatever beefs you have with people in your organization or against other organization, keep that shit offline. Don't, because y'all know me. I post pictures of the garden. I was posting pictures of Brewski every day. You knew what I ate for dinner. When Abdus was alive, you knew all of our shenanigans. Well, you didn't know all of our shenanigans. You know a lot of our shenanigans. But what we never did, and this was a line of principles that we held to. If we disagreed with people and organizations that we were with, and we did, and I have, that shit does not get broadcast. It stays in house, even if it's never resolved. You don't need to know about it. Your organizations, and you need to be an organization now, y'all. Your organizations need to have processes for dealing with internal struggle, processes that are principled, processes that are confidential, and you need to have processes for dealing with people who violate those processes. You must. And we need to hold to some kind of standard for how we deal with what I'm going to call rogue organizations that are resistant to those internal processes, those community processes of holding one another accountable, organizations that want to be outside of community and don't want to be held accountable. We need to adhere to a a a standard of those folks are persona non grata to us until somebody calls for help, and then we open our arms to people who want to break away from them, but we still don't broadcast they internal shit, because see, the state is coming for us, all of us. I'm not going to sit here and say that Ghazi Kadzo did not create the situation for the state to come after him. He did. He did. But I was very heartened to see the way organizations responded to the people who broke away from that organization. And I need for us to continue to do that and not put those people and that stuff on blast, because we don't need to make it any easier for the state to do what they're about to do for us. We don't need to. Don't help them motherfuckers. Don't. If your organization does not have some type of secure text messaging, and what is even secure anymore, who knows? Signal, WhatsApp, that they can tap into that. um, y'all get used to doing some in-person meetings where there is no technology involved. Get used to find somewhere where you got to put masks on, be safe, whatever. mm, Manny, you ain't said nothing but a word, girl. Letter writing is gonna be important, and the way they messing with the post office. But still, I don't. I think we really need to call on the wisdom of our ancestors who have gone through this before to get our pointers. I'm just telling you stuff off the top of my head that I have heard from people older than me who've been through this before. I'm trying to tell y'all what the state is about to do to Black radical organizations that are particularly socialist under this guise of anti-communism, tying folks to Russia and being under Russian influence. It's going to be awful. It is going to be awful. And this is the Biden administration absolutely holding up the fascist states of America in service to the system that this country really does sit on: fascism, capitalistic fascism. Absolutely. That's why he talking about giving more money to the police. What, $37 billion for 100,000 more police to be hired across the country? Not student loan debt cancellation, not expanded health care, Medicare access. $37 billion for 100,000 more cops to be hired. They're going to need that manpower to raid our organizations, to go after all of the Russian influenced socialists in this country. Oh, and for the white leftists, if you think that you opposing Putin is going to save you from this juggernaut, it will not. It will not, because if you call yourself a socialist, you're going to be caught up in it too. So that's what I think this raid on Uhuru House, and in a way some of the charges against Ghazi Kadzo um, mean and will mean for the rest of us in the 2 years left of Biden's administration to come. And trust me, regardless of who is in the White House in 2024, it will be a Republican, by the way, will not be a Democrat. Um, Regardless of who is in the White House in 2024, the repression against us won't change. Won't change. Biden is just laying the legal and ideological groundwork for it right now with uh, the soon to be passage of this um, Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act, and the connected repression of African and international Pan African radical socialist organizations in the US. That's what's going to happen. That's what I think. So, thanks a lot, y'all, for joining me for lunch today. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your support. I'll be on next week at some point, giving you an update about what all is going on with me, and and what's going on in the world. But until then, you all be good to yourselves, be really good to each other. And as always, a luta continua, the struggle for show continues. But Victoria Acerta, victory really is certain. It is, y'all. We just got to keep struggling. Peace.